All right, greetings and welcome to this episode on Geeks First. Today, it's all about Living Legend, or more accurately, is Living Legend good for the game of Flesh and Blood? Stay tuned. Well, hello and welcome to Geeks First. Thanks for tuning in on this episode. Today, we're going to be talking about some really interesting data, analytics, and metrics that I've been kind of building over the last month or so. Now, all this data that I'm aware of is publicly available, and I have just collated it into a very interesting and easy to read format. So if you like this kind of content, like, share, subscribe, hit that bell for more content notification, and until next time, definitely pay attention to every format because they all will matter. So let's talk about some things first. We're going to begin not talking about Flesh and Blood, but instead we're going to talk about a game near and dear to my heart called Pokemon. Now, with Pokemon, cards are identified with a letter at the bottom of the cards. Now, originally this wasn't the case, but a couple years ago they started doing an A, a B, a C, and now they're on D, E, and F. And Pokemon handles rotation, or cards that are legal in the current standard format, as the letters, in this case, on April 14th, 2023, D will be out of rotation, meaning it would cycle out. And this is older sets. So this would have been like Sword and Shield and some things that were back, give or take 1 to 2 years ago. And now sets with the E and the F logo will remain as part of the game and going forward, which is the newer silver border cards that come out in the later sets. So in this case, we have some, Sword and Shield base set, Rebel, Clash, Darkness Ablaze, Champion's Path, Vivid Voltage, basically all the sets that were super hype during the COVID boom pandemic. And now the newer sets, which is all the Scarlet and Violet sets, those are going to be what's legal. And what is nice about Pokemon and why that is important is because while a card may cycle out of legality because it was printed in an older set, you may have an older variation that was printed prior to the current version of the card. So as an example here, I believe if you had an older version of Professor's Research, which is now available in F, you could buy an older version that was maybe an A, a B, a C, or even one that wasn't labeled, as long as those versions of the card are the same. Now, it does say here that these cards remain legal, and you can keep using older versions as long as these cards with the D regulation mark. So basically, that's neat. And why that's important is because it still props up some of the older pricing in the game while making sure that if you owned a card, so I definitely own this Quick Ball here. I have probably a bunch of these from the Sword and Shield era. And if they did release it in a newer set, Quick Ball would be legal in the newer set as long as you had it available in the version. Now, I'm not going to go into the rest of this. This is not important for what we're talking about. I was mostly wanting to talk about the regulation marks D, E, F, and so on and so forth. That's how Pokemon handles it. Now, Magic the Gathering, another big behemoth in the card game industry. Magic has many formats: Standard, Extended, Legacy, Type 1, Commander, Vintage, Pauper, Modern, Postmodern. I don't know. There's probably more I'm not familiar with. However, I'm going to focus on just Standard because that is what I'm going to relate back to Flesh and Blood as being the legality system that kind of is Living Legend, and we're going to explain why. So in the standard format, we don't necessarily care about Magic's deck size, number of players, duration, and things like that, but what we do want to focus on is the sets that are legal. So we can notice here that it says Wilds of Eldraine, March of the Machine, Pyrexia All-Be-One, Brothers War, Dominaria, Streets of New Capenna, Kamigawa, Innistrad, and Midnight Hunt. Now, these sets here go back. In this case, if I were to look for here. All right, so we can see that Midnight Hunt was back September 24th, 2021, meaning that this is spanning, give or take, right around the 2-year mark. So for Magic, their rotation is based on number of sets within a certain time period. I don't have exact details on how they plan that. However, in this case, it looks to be about the 2-year mark, given that we are in October of 2023, and Wilds of Eldraine, in this case, Midnight Hunt, came out in September 24th, 2021. Now, let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! And again, I'm no expert in Yu-Gi-Oh! However, Yu-Gi-Oh!, based on my understanding, every card, except if it's on a banned and restricted list, is basically legal. Now, over time, cards have been power crept based on my understanding. So some of the older cards like Blue Eyes White Dragon and things like Toon, Skull, like those were stuff I played with back in the day. I don't think they're really relevant now, or Exodia maybe. I heard it kind of won a tournament recently. However, those are basically, it's an eternal format. However, it's controlled with a banned and restricted list. So as new products come out, the card pool grows, similar to Flesh and Blood. By the way, if that is wrong for whatever reason, please feel free to comment in the section below. But my understanding of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is very limited. Now, let's focus on the main thing that I would like to talk about, and that is the Living Legend format within Flesh and Blood. Now, Flesh and Blood has now hit its 4th year. Congratulations, Flesh and Blood, and happy belated birthday. I know that your birthday just came up recently, and I'm excited to see what's happening here for the next year as we roll into year 5. Okie dokie. So here we have a kind of short list here of released sets in Flesh and Blood. Now, the Welcome to Ira deck, obviously, or Welcome deck Ira, was the first product that came out, followed shortly by Welcome to Wraith and Arcane Rising, Crucible of War, Monarch. We had a bunch of Blitz decks, Old Hymn, Blitz deck, Levy After Tales of Aria, then Everfest, History Pack, Classic Battles came out, Uprising, Dynasty, History Pack 2, Outsiders, Dust Till Dawn, Around the Table, which was the first UPF product, and then Bright Lights, which was the most recent. And you can see that these span multiple years from 2019 to 2023. Now, you might say, well, what's legal? And that is an interesting concept because basically every card, theoretically, except if it's on the banned and restricted list for Classic Constructed or Blitz, which LSS does a regular scheduled banned and restricted announcement, those cards are legal. We need the banned and restricted list. Here you'll see with the card legality policy in Flesh and Blood that there are certain restrictions for card legality. In this case, special use promos, which this list used to be a lot smaller and it is growing as we start to see more things. So a lot of these are Rudy promos or the Shitty Christmas Present, as well as some of the like Taylor, which is a cosplay, Yorick, which that was kind of a hilarious one originally. But anyways, these are different cards that are not legal in the standard format, and they're spelled out here. Now, outside of that, the revolving legality within Living Legend is basically why this video is being made. Now, becoming a Living Legend means that as an adult hero, you must hit 1,000 Living Legend points, or as a young hero, 500. Now, my data so far, I've only really constructed around the adults because, frankly, there's a lot of data here, and with the amount of time, effort, and energy to go through the youngs, if this video does good, I will look at doing the same thing for the young heroes. Now, Classic Constructed, which is the premier format, as I would call it, that most people tend to go to tournaments for, so callings and pro quests and things like that, you'll notice that you can't use young heroes, and that heroes that hit the Living Legend status are not allowed to be used, as well as special promos. Now, outside of that, there is a small, I would say, manageable list of cards here that are banned. In this case, Awakening, Ball Lightning, Belittle, Bloodchief Skeletor, Drone of Brutality, Duskblade, Plunder Run, and Subby Hammers. Now, some of these cards are what we would call generic cards, meaning they can work in any class, such as Drone of Brutality. Others are more class-specific. And there's reasons, I'm sure, that somebody who is much more in the tune of the world would know. And then on top of that, you have what they call suspended lists. Now, these are suspended because they're going to be suspended until a certain hero hits Living Legend. Now, Bullseye Bracer, as an example, Lexi just hit Living Legend, and now Bullseye will be available, which means that Azalea, which is another Ranger hero, will be able to leverage that going forward. So this is just a quick explanation of how Flesh and Blood structures some of this. And I want to explain why the Living Legend system is so beautiful, and I think that long-term, it's going to help make Flesh and Blood such a unique game that a lot of people are going to really embrace this, and other games may actually follow to go to this system. All right, now here we go. Let's talk about the very first bit of information that is actually what I think a very important bit of information. Now, on September 22nd, 2022, an article came out called The Living Legend Update, and the Living Legend Update had in it a little blurb here, which is the basis or the fundamental basis of where a lot of my details for this started to manifest. I'll read this verbatim here because this is actually very important. A hero's lifespan is relative to the win percentage of events that offer LL, or Living Legend points. What do we think is a good lifespan look like? And then in next instance, ideally 15 to 20 months from release for a high-performing hero in Classic Constructed. The following table projected months to obtain Living Legend status based on 3 seasons per year, aligned with 3 main booster releases, which each season awarding up to, give or take, 1,000 Living Legend points. So there's a couple of things to nitpick with this, because at this stage we have released a little bit more than 3 sets per year. And we have, I believe, more than 3 seasons per year at this stage. So this is a little bit behind the 8 ball, but it is still useful. So we're going to ideally shoot for that 15 to 20 months. And now let's get into some of the interesting data. All right, here we go. I'm just showing Living Legend only heroes. Now, let's talk about this because we have a lot of data to cover and we're going to kind of jump right into this. 1,000 is the metric at which you have to hit to get Living Legend. Now you'll see here that Lexi, our recent addition here, just hit 1046, and with more time to spare before the ban announcement, this number may go up. Now, heroes like Bravo, Star of the Show, Briar, Warden of Thorns, Chain, Bound by Shadow, Oldhim, Grandfather of Eternity, Prism, Sculptor of Arclight, these names mean something to players that have been in the game because they were the top decks in some of the meta. And more specifically, they lasted longer, I think, than most people really gave them credit for. Now, obviously, a lot of people have a lot of opinions on how various versions of reality are, but the cold hard truth is that we have actual data to back up the when they hit Living Legend and the when they released. So I have some very unique data that I'd like to share here. So let's go ahead and showcase other heroes that are not Living Legend in this same graph. So here you go. You'll notice that we see 1,000 as our still point, and we have the ones in yellow here are the ones that have obtained Living Legend, and the ones that are in orange have not. Now, a lot of these heroes, again, are fairly new. Tekla especially coming out in Bright Lights, as well as Dash.io and Max the Hype Nitro. Those are very low and have hit 0 because they're brand new. Now, Arachne coming out in Dynasty is at 10, and Levia Shadowborn Abomination is only at 20, while Azuri, who came out in another set, basically is at 80. So you can see that some of these heroes really haven't done all that much. But look at Icelander. Now, Icelander came out in Uprising, and Icelander is at 872. And that means that that hero is really close to Living Legend. But the time that that hero has been out is a completely different aspect. So now let's take a look at some of the data. All right, so in column A, you can see that we have the adult heroes with a target of 1,000. And in this case, we have 28 heroes, well, 27 technically with this Fab 2.0 line. 27 heroes spreading across Welcome to Wraith, Arcane Rising, Monarch, Tales of Aria, Everfest, Uprising, Dynasty, Outsiders, Dust Till Dawn, and Bright Lights. So we have the next column. Are they Living Legend? We currently only have a total of 6 people that are Living Legend, highlighted in green here, which we've made their names earlier. Now, I do want to point out the next column, which is an also very interesting correlative topic. Now, do these heroes have a talent? And the short answer is, a lot of them that have hit Living Legend so far, yes, they really are. And I want to then point out the next piece, which is the position on the Living Legend chart, meaning that the ones that have already hit Living Legend cannot be on the Living Legend chart because they've already exited, but the ones that have talents are within, for the most part, minus Levia, the top 10 that are going to hit. So you can see Icelander is number 1 with 872 points. Number 2 is Dash Inventor Extraordinaire, which came out in Arcane Rising, so is 674 points. 3 is Viserai at 500. 4, which is next up, is Dromai, the basically now powerhouse because of the new card, is at 416. 5, which is Katsu the Wanderer Ninja, been around a while, 420. And we have number 6, which is Phi at 400, and I'm going to stop there. But basically what you can see is that basically the ones that have the talents may have, in a bubble ecosystem, have been too powerful. However, I will argue that they actually achieved the originally stated life expectancy goal. Ergo, the hot take here, these heroes were not overpowered. Now, I know that's going to be controversial, and those keyboard warriors, get ready to type your hearts out, because basically, next up, we can talk about the percent of Living Legend achievement. So on the road, we can now get a percentile, quantitative, a number, based on the percentage to see where they're at in their journey. So again, Levia is at 2% of her journey. Contrary, Prism, Chain, Oldhim, Lexi, Briar, and Bravo are all above 100% because they have a living Legend already. Now, again, the next closest hero is Icelander at 87.2% of their journey. Now, let's talk about release dates. So the universally acknowledged based on LSS date and time means that October 2019 was when Welcome to Wraith came out. And I'll skip all the dates because you can see them on screen. But the latest date, as an example, Bright Lights, was October 23rd, 2023. So because we have October 2023 as the date, we can now calculate the months since release. Now with each hero, starting at the oldest set, Welcome to Wraith, we had those at 48 months in existence. The next ones here were 42 at Arcane Rising, 28 for Monarch, 24 for Tales of Aria, 19 for Everfest, 15 for Uprising, Dynasty was at 10, Outsiders was at 6, Dusk Till Dawn 2, and the Magical Bright Light set is 0 because we are in the same month of release. Now, the next piece of information, which if you dig through the articles LSS produces, is the date at which a Banned and Restricted is announced. There go, talking about when they hit Living Legend. So we can see that released on May 21st, 2021, and hitting Living Legend status in August of 22, that Prism Sculptor of Arclight hit Living Legend. And now we can compare that to the 15 to 20 months of current life expectancy. So, here we go is our chart. Outside of the anomalous Bravo star of the show at 4 months to just speed running Living Legend, because we all know what happened there, no controversy, they have averaged out, when you average all these together, between Prism, Chain, Oldham, Lexi, Briar, and Bravo, have hit an average of a 17.5 month life expectancy, which is 1.5 years. Now, I'm going to pause here because we're going to go back to those other games. Remember, Magic was about a 2-year life cycle. Pokemon was about a 2-year life cycle. Yu-Gi-Oh! Well, cards are pretty much legal for their entire life. They're not on the banned and restricted list. So, for certain specific heroes, not their talents, not their classes, but specific heroes and their associated weapons, 15 months, 13 months, 22 months, 24 months, which is 2 years, for Briar to be around for 2 years? I mean, come on. That seems like they are well within their line of where they're at. Now, the next category here is the over-under life expectancy. Now, this is kind of a hilarious off-the-cuff number. Now, this does mean something. However, I'm not really sure how useful this is going to be, but this is where it gets hilarious, right? So if we start looking at Bravo, who is only 36% of the way to where they're at. Based on their time since released, they are at 274% of their expected life expectancy, meaning that they should have basically achieved Living Legend status over a year and a half ago. Contrary, if we look at the brand new Bright Lights heroes, they are at 0% because their expectancy has not achieved. Now, where you get to that nice kind of mark at is the Fab 2.0 line. And you'll notice that the heroes that are Fab 2.0 or higher are starting to get to that where they want a Living Legend out, which again, if you look at the Icelander option, 872 points means that they're right in line with where they wanted to go. 87%. Look at that. They're about 87% on the way there. I think they freaking nailed it. Just right on the head. Look at that. That math checks out. 15 months, 86% of the way there, 86% of the life expectancy of 15 to 20, or 17.5, which is the average that I put up here. That's awesome. Now, obviously, heroes that are pre with no talent seem to have, or could be extrapolated, that there is some sort of maybe discrepancy or lack of having that talent, which kind of puts them on maybe a back foot a little bit in this fighting game, because maybe they don't have access to certain things. Now, I'm not saying that they're underpowered. I'm not saying they're overpowered. I'm not even saying that the heroes with talents are overpowered. You'll notice that they really haven't released any talented heroes outside of Dusk Till Dawn replacement, direct replacement, I might add, for what would have been the original Monarch heroes. Now, if we expect that within the next 3 sets, they knew that the Tales of Aria Ice Elementals, I'd almost put the word, I'd put the G word. I'd guarantee that I would see within the next year or two with the set release schedule that's coming up, I would imagine we're going to see new elemental heroes, which are going to bring those elements back in a different flavor. That's what I would expect. We already know the next set's heavy hitters. Who knows? There might be an elemental piece of equipment that's in there that does something like it grants, an element class or subclass type that fits with something. So you can bolt those on. Don't think that's going to happen, honestly, but could be really neat. No idea. The last one, or the last interesting one, is expected in dates in months. So living legend in months. So at 274%, that means that this formula, it's a little weird. I'm going to explain this. So this formula takes the percent of living legend road and is divided by the month since release. Now, that means that the expected time, or from today, I expect Bravo's Showstopper, with no changes in card pool or whatever, which we know is not going to happen, right? That 133 months from now, or 11.1 years, Bravo will living legend. The most hilarious one on here, because it's just stupidly probably inaccurate, is Levia. And Levia will take 1,400 months or 116 years before that poor girl hits living legend. Again, this is where this gets hilarious to me, because this is just kind of BS data right here. But this was what I was trying to get to, is knowing that these dates and the generally accepted lifespan, which is 17.5, which is the medium between 15 and 20, that they're really doing a darn good job of this. And I will keep tracking this as we go forward. I will keep tracking as we release new ones, because I've already done the work. Now, I do need to do the work on the young heroes. I have most of it spelled out here, and then we have the promo heroes down here, but I haven't actually built that data because, frankly, the data it's ever changing, right? So this is only going to be good for a snap point in time. Now, if you're curious about that projected month, here's a table that I omitted earlier. So you'll see if they win average of 10%, they want 40 months to be a living legend. So if they're 10% of the meta, they want 40 months. If it's 50%, they want 8 months. So look at this. How much percentage? So if these keep going up, right, 45, 9, 50 is 8, 60 you could extrapolate to 7, 70 is 6, 80% would be 5, and 90%. So probably Starvo was like 80 to 90% of the meta when that was happening, which is why he yeeted himself out in 4 months. It's a breaker. It's a literal built-in containment system that's just freaking awesome. So yeah, here's some references. I have lots of references here based on when certain heroes hit. That's how I got some certain points of data. Again, I am happy to talk this over with anybody. This is the kind of stuff I live and breathe. I love this kind of stuff. I love charts. I love pivot tables. I'm not the best at all of them. This thing can get real crazy. I've done some other versions of this that it's just freaking insane. But that's it. Thank you so much for listening to this, and I really appreciate this. I know it's more of a podcasty style with just me talking, but really, the Living Legend system is a beauty. It's a marvel, and it's something that I think people aren't respecting. And with the advent of the new Living Legend format being officially announced and coming out in Worlds, which is going to be over in I think it's Barcelona in Spain, I can't wait to see people exploring these heroes again, and maybe some for the first time. But as we watch these heroes grow, as these heroes kind of bubble out and our own standard list happens, right? And we get to see those heroes, level up and evolve to the next level. I'm really excited to see where things go. So until next time, may your games be fun and your friendships grow. Cheers. And hey, if you've made it this far, I'm gonna throw a little secret in here. I want you to comment in the comment section below, Ditto, Ditto. It's a Pokemon. It can be any Pokemon, because it would be really fun to have a Shyana altered like a Ditto. And if you know somebody that can do that for me, put their name in the comments below, and I will go pay them, hopefully, to do a Ditto Shyana, because that'd be really cute. All right. See you next time. Bye.